Hey, good morning to you. I get to tell you again, Jesus is Lord, thank God. Hey, the word works. You got to believe what God said and not what all the circumstances around you say. I mean, it's cold outside today. It's going to be colder this weekend, but see, I'm on the inside. So I'm not having to put up with the cold because I'm inside. Well, I am in the kingdom. I'm inside where the blessings of God are, so I don't have to have the yuck that's outside. You need to get that. Now, we're talking about over 40 years ago. I'd been in the ministry. I pastored my first church when I was 19. But our little boys were just small, and we had been living in Maryland for a while, and we'd been moved back, and we didn't have anything. We was having to live with my mom and dad in their little 2-bedroom house and these 3 little boys, and staying outside a good bit of the time because Dad was working at night and needed to sleep. And so we were struggling to try to find where we were going, what we were going to do. I'm just a young man. I've left my last church. I don't know where I'm going to go. We're sitting in a little denominational church, and while we're sitting there, I was sitting there and the Lord spoke to me. And I opened my Bible to Psalm 115, verse 14. Now, we got 3 little boys. I think Mark might have been 7. He's now 50. So that's 43 years ago. And the Lord said this, "The Lord shall increase you more and more, you and your children." I looked at Pat, during the song service. I looked at Pat and she looked at me. I said, God ain't got to do much to increase us. I mean, $1 would have been a huge increase at the time. But what we had to do was to learn to believe that God wanted us to be blessed and that He wanted us to be increased rather than it was Him that sent all of those bad circumstances our way. He didn't do that. I messed up. Made some mistakes. A lot of times where we are is because of some choices that we made, but we want to blame God for it. Quit trying to blame God for what you did and what the devil did and believe what He said. And so at that point in our life, 43 years ago, at that point in our life, we began to believe God for an increase. Man, I had an old dog car with Maypops on it. I didn't have a job. We had just moved down here. I'd been beat up by the circumstances that I'd created for myself. And so being on an increase was anything. The very next week, I said, well, I'm going to go over to here to this trucking company because I had been a truck driver. I'm going to apply for a job. And I went down there and made the application. They said, well, we're not hiring right now. And I said, well, I'm going to sit here until you do. Believed God for that job, got that job, and the next day went to work, which was a huge increase. Like somebody says, you read these things on Facebook and so forth, says, well, you're going to come into a lot of money. God's going to change your circumstances. Yeah, go get you a job. That's the first thing you need to do. Things changed. I was able to save my money, go back up to Maryland, get my furniture, a few odds and ends that we had. We rented a house in just the next, maybe 60 days. There was a huge increase when I found out what God said. Y'all going to get that. When the Lord spoke to me, and I began to find out it wasn't the will of God to be broke, be sick, be under the curse. And God told me I'd be on the increase. And I turned there and looked at Pat in that little old church and said, hey, it wouldn't take much for God to increase us. I'm ready. Boy, I have been on the increase ever since. Now, watch this. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but, I have been married 52 years, so you ought to be able to figure out something on that. And my oldest son is 50, so, I've been here a while. But Pat and I are on the increase. Just because we're over 50 don't mean we're going to downsize. We're believing for houses. That's what the Bible talks about. I'm not trying to figure out how to get a smaller house because we don't need all the room. Hey, we still, when we have the parties, just barely have enough room to have them. I'm on the increase all the days of my life. It is the will of God for you to be on the increase. It's not the will of God for you to back off, back up, and when you get old and retired, you just can't have the better things of life. No. Be on the increase all the days of your life. Hey, I got to go. Saints, remember all day, Jesus is Lord. Thank God the word works.